It's another beautiful day for baseball in Los Angeles. And baseball podcast. Josh Schaefer and Blake Harris cover everything Dodgers right here on Inside the Ravine.
How's it going, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Inside the Ravine, Part 3 of The Sky is Falling. Part 2 was last week. Part 1 was back at the beginning of the season. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Josh Schaefer. Josh, have you avoided the sky falling over there in Ontario yet? Or, because the Monrovia came down, but I don't know if Ontario's on lockdown just yet.
Yeah, not quite yet. We're probably getting pretty close though. Yeah, I mean things current outlook not looking too great.
Perfectly said. So we're going to be talking about the latest series in St. Louis, the latest Dodgers news, and at the end of the episode, we're going to get to a mailbag from the listeners. But before we get to all that, make sure you guys follow the show on any sort of social media app you guys use. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Inside the Ravine. You guys can also watch and listen to full episodes over on YouTube. Just search Inside the Ravine, and we can, we're on any sort of podcast app you guys use, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Odyssey app, anything out there. You guys can find us wherever you guys get your podcasts. So Josh, we talked about this last week prior to the St. Louis series, that this is going to be a really tough stretch for the Dodgers. 3 really difficult opponents coming up. Obviously the Cardinals, things haven't gone their way so far this season, but they've been playing some really good baseball. And they took it to the Dodgers. They take 3 out of 3 or 3 out of 4. I think they score something like 30 runs over the 4-game series. The Dodgers offense, they still scored 5 runs a game, but the pitching let them down exponentially. So before we get to kind of like the moves overall as a whole that are going to be a bigger picture, just what were your takeaways from that 4-game series in St. Louis that the Dodgers dropped?
Well, the Dodgers came from behind a couple of times, which was nice. It was just that, they couldn't keep the scoring going, or the bullpen just really, let them down. I mean, you can't continue to give up as many runs as they are. The bullpen has not been good. Obviously you look at the starting pitching too, and the starting pitching wasn't at its best. Kershaw's last 2 starts haven't been great. 4 losses this year already for Kershaw, but he's been the Dodgers' best pitcher. Obviously that doesn't tell the whole story. Wins and losses are kind of dumb anyway. But 4 earned runs on 5 hits in 3 2/3 innings with only 6 strikeouts for Kershaw. And then at that point, sure, he gives up 4 3 2/3 innings. The Dodgers score 5 runs, but it just wasn't good enough. When the bullpen gives up 6 runs, it's not good enough. And it was like that over the course of, a few games. So combine the Dodgers having some comebacks, but then poor pitching from the bullpen, the starting rotation not having its best stuff. It kind of adds up. And for the Dodgers, it added up into dropping 3 of 4.
Yeah,
with the exception, of course, of the second game of the series where the Dodgers were great. Across the board, everybody was great.
Yeah, I was going to say the series makes no sense because 3 of the games they were just horrendous, and then Friday they didn't allow a run. I think in total they allowed like 2 hits. So there was that one game where the pitching staff looked fantastic, but yeah. Obviously Thursday, I think we did a show Friday morning talking about how awful that was all the way around, and 16 runs. And then on Saturday, not an awful game, I guess, by the pitching staff overall. It's just the offense couldn't get the job done at the end. But yeah, yesterday Clayton Kershaw didn't have his best stuff, and then obviously things fell apart for the bullpen. So this is a starting rotation that, over the last week or so, I don't think anyone's pitched more than 4 innings. Maybe one guy went 5 during that stretch, but this is a bullpen that's had to eat a lot of innings, and things are starting to add up as we saw kind of these last few games. So things are just not really looking well for the Dodgers starting rotation, looking really well for the bullpen right now. I will give the offense credit because I know that a lot of people are going to be really upset over this series, but again, the offense scored 5 runs every game. Entering the series, Josh, when the Dodgers scored 5+ runs, they were 22-3. In this series alone, they went 1-3, so pretty much a month and a half's worth of games in which they lost by scoring 5 runs. They did that over the course of a 4-day stretch, so the offense did their part, but yeah, Josh, the biggest concern now, we've talked about the starting rotation, obviously just 5 days ago, the Dodgers lost Dustin May. It's still looking like it's going to be maybe a month and a half to 2 months. But Julio Urias goes on the IL with a hamstring injury. A little interesting because you don't really see pitchers go on the IL with hamstring injuries. Julio didn't exit his start early with an injury. He exited his start because he got, lit up. Following the game, there was no mention of this hamstring issue. So I guess maybe that's a silver lining as to why Julio was so bad. He was potentially dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury. It sounds like he's not going to miss more than his 15-day IL stint. So I guess that means he'll miss maybe 2 starts at the absolute most. But yeah, Josh, we talked about this in our last episode, a rotation that can't afford anyone going out. And although Julio has missed time, you don't want him to miss, more than a couple of starts when he's the guy that usually eats a lot of innings for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, he hasn't had his best stuff this season. And I think that we know that and we've talked about that, but that doesn't diminish how important of a role he has at this point. And it leaves a hole for sure. And it just comes at a really bad time when obviously Syndergaard hasn't gotten it done. Dustin May is going to be out for a little bit. Obviously, we just talked about that on the last episode. Kershaw, I'm not worried about Kershaw, but to be completely fair, his last 2 starts have not been his best stuff. And then also when you have so many injuries to, other guys that could be in the rotation, thank goodness Tony Gonsolin's back, right? Like, I mean, we were, this is, shoulda, coulda, woulda, this is all a hypothetical, but like, if this had happened like a couple of weeks ago, the Dodgers would have been in an even darker place than they are right now. And then you throw in the fact that the bullpen just has not been good over the last week or so. Right when the bullpen was pitching really, really well, the offense was doing really well. The starting pitchers were doing well over the course of, what was it, like 15 games? The Dodgers were awesome across the board. But now when the bullpen is struggling and the starting pitching is struggling and fine, the offense is doing okay, but now you have injuries to the starting rotation. It just kind of is all piling up for the Dodgers right now. And again, sky is falling is a term we're losing, a little bit loosely because, they've dropped 3 or 4, but they're still in first place in the division. They're still, having, a decent prospectus for, the next couple of weeks too. But it really is adding up. And I think that this is a huge hole that the Dodgers have to somehow dig themselves out of. And maybe the prospects are going to be the guys to do it.
Yeah, yesterday after the loss, I went and crunched some numbers. Now, I don't know if this stat kind of shows just how bad the Dodgers have been over the last week or just how good overall they were over the previous couple weeks, but over their 7 games, the Dodgers have allowed 48 runs. Josh, would you like to take a guess as to how many games it took combined for them to allow 48 runs prior to this stretch? So again, it's taken 7 games for them to allow 48 runs. So prior to that, how long do you think it took them to allow a combined 48 runs?
I'll go 20 games.
You were close, 16 games. So maybe again, that just goes to show how good the pitching was doing over that 2.5-week stretch where that's essentially, according to my ASU math, just under 3 runs a game over a 16-game stretch. So they were looking really well, but over the last couple of weeks, they haven't been going well. Josh, also another thing that I put together the other day, and this just goes to show how depleted this Dodgers starting rotation is.
This was a tough tweet to look at.
Yeah,
Go
this
ahead,
one.
read it.
So we got Clayton Kershaw at the top, currently healthy, which knock on wood because you'd expect an IL stint at some point. We got Julio Urias on the IL. Walker Buehler on the IL, potentially going to miss the rest of the season. Dustin May on the IL, don't know when he's going to return. Tony Gonsolin, currently healthy, but he's already missed a month, and he's very injury prone. You have Noah Syndergaard, who has an ERA of 6. Ryan Pepio, who is currently on the IL, not expected to be back until after the All-Star break. Michael Grove, who's missed over a month, not sure exactly when he's going to be back, although it seems like he might be back within the next couple of weeks. You have Andre Jackson, who has a career ERA of 8, and then now you get to the guys we're going to talk about next, but Josh, that is 9 to 10 guys that the Dodgers have had to go through to essentially get to their 11th and 12th options. It's just been insane how hurt this Dodgers rotation has been through the first 2 months of the year. Now, granted, we weren't expecting some guys to be pitching for him this season. Obviously, guys like Michael Grove, Ryan Pepio weren't really expecting much for them, but injuries have happened, and these guys are on the IL, so you can make your own expansion team of all the players that should have been starting for the Dodgers this year. It's been incredible.
Yeah, it's been it hasn't been great. And it seems like the Dodgers have been really hit by the injury bug a lot these last couple seasons. As of course, everyone has, it's a long season. No one just gets lucky with the injury bug. It's just that the Dodgers have been so incredibly unlucky these last couple of years, especially early in seasons, too. It was tough 2 years ago when the Dodgers had the injury bug late. Muncy was out, and right when Muncy had gotten really hot at the end of the year, he was hurt for the playoffs back in 2021. That was tough for the Dodgers. You get hit at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. But really, these last couple of years, it's been going into the first month and a half of the season where the Dodgers have been hit pretty bad, and now they're getting hit going into the summer. So if you can survive a little bit longer, obviously, if it's looking like a month or so for Dustin May, hopefully you don't have to rush him back, and Julio being out for a little bit as well. Again, I think if you can keep your head above water at this point, right now it seems like a lot of different pieces have been moving for the Dodgers, and the offense has been a lot better. It's probably at the best point it's been this season, right? They've probably, I'm not saying they've hit their peak, but they're at their highest point so far. So if the offense keeps doing what it's doing and you can get some sort of serviceable outings from the starting pitching and the bullpen, like at that point, I think you're in a pretty good spot, right? But it's just that everything is kind of piling up and hitting the Dodgers right now all at once from a pitching standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, again, you lose Dustin May, you lose Julio Urias over a 4-day span. Now, this is when things got really interesting because obviously all those names I just mentioned, most of them are on the injured list, where if Dustin May, Julio go out, you would think a Ryan Pepiot would fill in, maybe a Michael Grove, but obviously they can't turn to those guys right now. Last week, we saw Dylan Covey come up and make, an appearance for the Dodgers. He probably would have been a starting pitching option, but he was DFA'd. He got claimed by the Phillies, so he's not an option. So pretty much, it was looking like, okay, maybe Andre Jackson is a guy that can start a game for the Dodgers, but outside of him, the options are really slim on the 40-man roster. Well, Josh, this was something we talked about numerous times this offseason. It was a question we got asked a lot whenever we did mailbags. And a lot of people always asked, at what point are we going to see Gavin Stone and Bobby Miller? I think we both said, we might see one of them by the All-Star break, but in order to see both of them, maybe towards the end of the season when they do September call-ups. Josh, if you would have had to make a wager on seeing both of these pitchers in the starting rotation in the middle of May, I think you would have won a lot of money, because that's the state of this Dodgers starting rotation. Gavin Stone, obviously he's already on the 40-man roster. He made a start a couple weeks ago at the big league level. He's going to be starting tonight in Atlanta, and then tomorrow taking Julio's spot is going to be Bobby Miller, who I think has only made 4 starts in AAA so far this year. Hasn't been great, but the Dodgers have no other options, so their number 1, their number 2 pitching prospects are going to be thrown into the fire in Atlanta. So, Josh, I guess what are your thoughts on seeing these two guys that we've been wanting to see all year, but maybe not given these circumstances quite yet in Atlanta?
Hey, I mean, we're going to have to see something, right? Again, give me something serviceable. And obviously Stone's, debut earlier this year didn't go as planned. He goes tonight, kind of gets thrown into the fire a little bit. And then obviously Bobby Miller will tomorrow. And, we've been talking about these guys for a while. We've seen them at spring training. We've liked what we've seen, obviously, for the most part. And right now, I mean, this is kind of a big moment for the Dodgers this season, right? To have these guys come in. And again, we've seen this in the past where guys have come in and took advantage of opportunities. More so, I think, from a position player standpoint. But the Dodgers right now really need some sort of serviceable outings from these two guys over the next couple of days. And again, you look back at these last 4 games against the Cardinals, and if you told me going in the Dodgers would have scored 5 runs in every single game, I would have said they're either sweeping or taking 3 or 4, not the other way around. So right now, I think you have to be confident in the bats. And if you can get some decent outings out of these two guys, even if they're just eating innings at this point, like if Bobby Miller comes in to tomorrow's game or Tuesday's game against Spencer Strider and the Braves, let's say he gives up 4 runs, he goes 5, 6 innings, buys some time, I'm fine with it. I just think that's what the Dodgers need right now, because look, Kershaw didn't even go 4 innings the other day. And again, Kershaw's not the only reason the team lost. The bullpen gave up runs. The Dodgers didn't score as many runs as they could have. But look, like you've got some of your starters that aren't even going 4 innings these last couple of games. If you can get these two guys in, and if they can be serviceable and go 5 innings, I think it's a great outing. That's a quality outing from a guy making, his first or second start. But I don't even know if they're going to have that long of a leash. So I'm optimistic going in. I'm excited to see what we'll get. But I mean, the major league scouting report on these guys is not very expansive. So maybe that's something that's going to work out for them too. But we've liked what we've seen in spring training in the past, and we'll see what we get this week.
Yeah, I mean that's tough in regards to this whole situation because this is like a very exciting couple of days for Dodgers fans because they're getting to see potentially the future of the pitching staff going on back-to-back days. It's just I wish that the situation was entirely different because one, again, you're having to go into Atlanta, the best team in the National League, and you're saying, okay, guys, you guys were facing AAA guys last week. Here's the Atlanta Braves offense. And then two, you're kind of banking on them to go deep into the games. Josh, I think I wrote an article on this morning. If Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone can give the Dodgers a combined 10 innings over these next 2 days, I think that'll be a success. And personally, I agree with you. I would much rather have Gavin Stone tonight go 6 innings and allow 4 runs than him going 4 innings and allowing 2 runs. I think the Dodgers offense, like you said, they're more than capable of giving at least 5. They're going to be able to back him up, and the Dodgers desperately need these guys to give them some sort of length because everyone is certain at this point. The last thing you need is Gavin Stone, who I think went 4 innings, his first time around. If things just go horrible and he only goes 3 innings tonight, you got to use the bullpen, and then tomorrow for Bobby Miller's debut, I mean, again, maybe he surprises us. Maybe he's able to go 5 or 6 innings. But for a guy making his debut, who knows how long his leash is, who knows how many pitches he's going to be able to make. It's kind of scary knowing just, again, how important these next 2 starts are for the Dodgers bullpen. And you're having to rely on guys that have a combined 4 innings at the big league level. They're going to be facing one of the best starting lineups in all of baseball. It just seems like a lose-lose situation all around, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work out great for them. I mean, I think that the Dodgers would have rather had this kind of come on them and come to them like in a different situation where maybe the team was rolling a little bit more, but the breaks that they've had right now, they're coming at a bad time. And that's just how it's worked out. And they're on a tough stretch here, and they've got some big games coming up. And they're going to need everybody. And that's what we've talked about recently was, there have been some other teams that have been relying on just a couple of guys. And so far the Dodgers, especially on the winning streak, when they've had challenges, come right in front of them, they've been able to kind of work through it as a team. And right now that's what they're going to need over the course of these next few games. It's not going to be all on Bobby Miller. It's not going to be all on Gavin Stone. It's not going to be all on the bullpen. Everyone's going to have to kind of pick themselves up, which is what was going so well during that long winning streak. Now they've lost a couple of games, and, hopefully they'll figure it out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so we'll wait and see. We'll see what happens, but Gavin Stone going tonight, Bobby Miller going on Tuesday. Again, the Dodgers' #1 and #2 pitching prospects. So exciting times. These guys are the future for the rotation. I don't think we were expecting to see both of them this early, but hey, this is what happens in baseball. Maybe they go out, maybe they shove, maybe they surprise us, and maybe they cement themselves in that starting rotation, and Noah Syndergaard doesn't have a spot moving forward because I won't be too upset about that. But Josh, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be wrapping up the show answering questions from our viewers. All right, Josh, we are back. We're going to wrap this show up with some questions. Again, if you guys ever have a question you guys would like to ask us, make sure to follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Usually before we do a show, we always tweet out when we're going to be doing a Q&A, when we're going to be doing a mailbag. So we want to hear from you guys. And again, if you guys want to leave us a voicemail, that's open 24/7. You guys can give that a ring at 323-736-1815. Let us know your thoughts on the state of the Dodgers or ask us a question. We'll play that on a future episode. Josh, this question, it's not from anyone. It's actually going to be from me, and it's going to be directed at you because I'd actually like to hear your thoughts on this. Obviously, the other night, the Dodgers lost in a very controversial way to the Cardinals. Strike 3 was called, should have been ball 4, and the Dodgers, in my opinion, showed no sort of emotion. I wrote an article on this, and I think Max Muncy is actually a subscriber to my Substack because I can't remember the last time a Dodger player actually got ejected from a game because it just never happens. They never really showed that kind of emotion. Obviously, yesterday, Max Muncy gets ejected for arguing a call. He gets ejected by the third base umpire who was the home plate umpire the night before. But Josh, I just want to know your thoughts. Why do you think the Dodgers just don't really show that much emotion when it comes to bad calls, controversial moments? Because if I was a manager, I'd be pulling an Aaron Boone where I'm getting ejected every week. These players, they never really seem to get in the face with anyone. So do you kind of like that, like Mookie Betts just walked away there to end the game? Or would you have liked to see him kind of get in the face of the home plate umpire and let him hear it for blowing a call in a crucial moment?
I look. First of all, I mean that whole thing yesterday and in the game when he got ejected, I thought was kind of a joke because I think that he's well within his rights to complain about a call like that. And then he was a little bit animated and he said he shouldn't have let it get that far. But walking back to the dugout and the third base umpire thinking he was upset about the night before, that's just. I just thought the whole thing with the third base umpire is ridiculous and doesn't need to happen. And that's uh, I'm usually pretty pretty pro player and manager in these types of situations. Like if somebody deserves to be ejected, they deserve to be ejected. But the one the other day was like I just felt like the third base umpire was kind of just inserting himself into the situation. But look, like I thought the same thing. Like Mookie's great. Mookie's a character. Like he is a great presence for the team. And obviously he's a great player, but I feel like Mookie has never shown emotion like that. Like he's never like let the umpire have like the game's over. I'd get tossed after the game. What are they going to do? Still be back in the lineup tomorrow and you'll
Right.
play another game. Like the fact that the game's over, like I would have gotten tossed. I mean, because look, like it was outside. That's not why the Dodgers lost. It definitely changes things when there's runners on first and second and two outs, and the best hitter on the team's coming to the plate who already had multiple hits that day. So that changes the complexion of the game a little bit. But that's not why the Dodgers lost, but it certainly did not help their case at all. So the fact that there was really and the part that got me wasn't, and I'm not trying to knock Mookie here. It wasn't even that Mookie didn't argue or anything or didn't, really display any frustration. It was the dugout just kind of sitting there with their hands on their heads. I'm like, how is nobody hollering? How is nobody getting upset about it? Everyone was kind of just sitting there, which is what I get it. Like it was a bad call. It was outside. Like sometimes those things kind of freeze you a little bit. But the way that I saw it was like, how is nobody, at least based off of what you could see on the broadcast, it seemed like nobody was chirping at all. No one displayed any type of frustration whatsoever, which is kind of that's kind of what stood out to me too. And you know what? Muncy
Yeah.
gets tossed the next day. I think it's disappointing about when it happened and how it happened. But again, like even he said, like, all right, like I shouldn't have. I should have like not let it get that far. But again, like I don't even totally side against him in that case.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not asking for guys to be getting ejected, but like you said, especially with the game already being over, what's going to happen? You get thrown out of the game that's already over. Dave, he was silent. I'd like to see Dave react more. And again, this not in regards to even arguing calls. Even if you flip things around to celebrate and go on nuts, every time the Cardinals hit a home run, they were slamming their bat down. They were tossing it. They were looking towards their dugout, going absolutely nuts. They were going crazy around in the bases. And that's just something that we have not seen from the Dodgers this season, last season. Honestly, really, ever since we had Puig. Like, Puig was the last night that ever kind of showed emotion. So, I don't know if this is just their mentality they want to have. We talked about this so many times during the offseason, how, not saying that's the reason the Dodgers lost to the Padres, but clearly they were out of motion when it came to that. So, I'd like to see something. Even my girlfriend, I was talking to her about this the other day, and she's like, the fact that we saw in the World Baseball Classic from so many of the guys that show that they can have this emotion and they just choose not to. I don't know. I'd like to see something. Obviously, they don't have a home run celebration gimmick that most teams have. Just anything. Just show me some sort of emotion when a big play happens. That's all I got to see. But Josh, moving on to some questions from some viewers. This first one is fantastic. This comes from Gary Carr. We talked about pitching earlier in the episode, Josh. Gary wants to know, can either of the podcast hosts pitch? So if needed, Josh, if too many guys just hit the IL, and open tryouts happen at Dodger Stadium. Are you going to be there? Like, what was the latest that the gun produced when you threw a fastball?
Not great. I honestly don't know what my range would be here. It definitely wouldn't be hard. I think my fastball would be low 80s is my guess, if I could even get there. I throw three pitches generously. Three pitches. I go fastball, changeup, slider, and here's actually, you were there sometimes when we were in college, and the world ended with COVID, or nearly ended. We would go onto the roof of our parking garage, right, and play catch all the time. Us and my roommates or whatever. Well, they had a barrier of the parking structure where every couple spots it would just be like a support beam, but it'd be like the top of it since we were on the top floor, and there was like a wall behind it, and I would frame up this little this pillar as like a strike zone, and I would pinpoint a mark on it, and I would try to throw my slider and hit the corner of it every single time. So I definitely worked that out a little bit during COVID. It's been some time, but I think I could get in and throw a below average fastball, well below average fastball, a well below average slider, and a changeup that might get a swing and miss, but might also be deposited 450 to dead center. I would be happy to give it a go.
Yeah, my two pitches would probably be a fastball and a slow ball. And the only issue is, Josh, is that you might get one or two pitches out of me, because unless I'm underhanding this thing, if I'm throwing it overhand, my arm's probably going out right away. Like, I remember when we were up there on the roof throwing around, I remember just like the first throw I did, because I hadn't thrown in so many years, I was feeling it in my arm. So if I go out there to pitch and you're asking me to just give a little oomph, my arm's gone. It's not making it. So we're getting some underhand, like in Rookie of the Year at the very end. We're getting those kind of pitches, so just impossible ephyses. Or we're just getting overhand slow balls that are coming at you at 60 miles an hour at the absolute most. That's probably also an ephys of its own, but it's not going to be great, Josh. But hey, maybe they have issues.
I would underhand one like a slow pitch softball. Get it super high up there. Let it float into the strike zone. And that angle, no one's barreling that up.
No. It's too tough. We've seen it. We've seen guys struggle with it.
Let's try it.
So maybe we'll be able to get a couple out of there. This comes from Caitlin Carnies. When is the point in having the best farm system in the league if our top prospects just sit there while Trayce Thompson is 0 for 38? Yeah, Josh, I think Trayce Thompson now officially is tied the longest hitless streak by a non-pitcher in Dodgers history. So I believe the next time he gets out, if he goes 0 for 39, that'll set the record. So a lot of people are calling for Trayce Thompson to be DFA'd. But the only issue is the Dodgers have no options in the minors outside of two guys we've talked about, back in spring training, and Johnny DeLuca and Andy Pages. But they were both just called up to AAA last week. And I don't think the Dodgers are going to want to go to them. So Josh, it looks like they got to ride it out with Trayce Thompson for at least a couple months and hope he turns it around. If not, maybe 2 more months will be enough time for these guys. But yeah, that's the reason the Dodgers can't DFA him, is because they have no better options currently at the moment.
Yeah, they don't really have any options right there. And I feel like, is Trayce the better option? I feel like he is. So, I mean, it's definitely not a good outlook for the Dodgers. But right now you don't really have anybody else that can come in. So that's kind of where I'm at looking right now. So I don't know, man. I guess you just kind of hope that he gets a couple of ABs here and can break out of this thing. Thought maybe it would be that with that walk-off walk the other night, but still not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, he's not really getting any starts, maybe one start a week. He's getting a couple of bats here and there, so not ideal. You wish he was getting hits, but he's not really killing you. And obviously, you don't want to DFA him because someone else is probably going to claim him. And yeah, you don't know what you're going to get with DeLuca or what you're going to get with Pages. So, like I said, at this point, ride it out. Hopefully, he's able to turn things around at some point, but it's not looking great. Josh, we have one final question, and this comes from Jay the We Believe Doyers. what is a realistic trade at the deadline that will make this team better? You don't have to necessarily make a pick for like a player you think the Dodgers should trade for, but maybe like a position. What's like a realistic position that you think the Dodgers could desperately use to upgrade at the trade deadline, given the state of the team at the moment?
I mean, I think they have to go pitching. One way or another, the Dodgers will upgrade the pitching staff at the deadline. They have to. They absolutely have to. And beyond that, I think that hypothetically you could add another outfielder. And the reason why I think you could go outfield is because you have a guy like Chris Taylor that can kind of be a little bit more versatile. Obviously, he hasn't had a great year, but I think the Dodgers were probably expecting him to improve at some point. But I don't know. I mean, if you do outfield, that just kind of for me solidifies trying to put Mookie in the infield more often, or in fact you go the opposite direction and add an infielder and keep Mookie in the outfield. I mean, for me, it's got to be one or the other. But the number one for me is it has to be pitching. You have to do something to improve your bullpen or your rotation if guys are not coming back from injuries when you want them to, but the pitching has to be improved.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, whether it's a starter, whether it's a guy out of the bullpen, the Dodgers could desperately use an upgrade there. And I like what you said also about adding another outfielder, just because the Dodgers, although they have a plethora of outfielders, I do think they could use another one. Obviously, you have Mookie there, where if you want to throw him at shortstop or second base whenever, that gives more opportunities. But James Outman has really cooled down over the last month. His numbers have taken a hit. David Peralta obviously hasn't done really much at any point this season. Jason Hayward, after his hot start, his numbers have been declining, over the last month and a half. And again, with Trace Thompson, he's been horrendous as well. So you want to have some options. So maybe a corner outfielder, maybe someone in left field that becomes available. The issue is, at this point, we don't know who's going to be available because with how many teams make the playoffs now, like unless you're the Oakland A's, you're pretty much going to be in the playoff hunt by the time the trade deadline rolls around. So it's tough to really predict who the Dodgers could potentially trade for, but someone. They'll make a trade for someone. It's just a matter of who. But Josh, that does wrap it up for today's episode of Inside the Ravine. Again, you guys can give us a follow on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Inside the Ravine. You guys can also watch and listen to the full episode over on YouTube. Also, make sure to listen to the podcast wherever you guys get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple, the Odyssey app. Make sure to leave us a 5-star rating over there, a positive review, or just some things you'd like to see from the podcast moving forward. Josh, before we wrap things up, any parting words before we send the rookies into the fire that is Atlanta?
Yeah, God, it's going to be a tough series here, and I think that off day coming up on Thursday could not come soon enough for the Dodgers. So quick turnaround from St. Louis to Atlanta, and the tough stretch continues. So would be nice to see these guys come out and eat some innings.
We need to come up with some sort of nickname for this trio of rookies between Michael Busch, Gavin Stone, and Bobby Miller. All three guys with beers as their last names. So, hey, the rookie beer league guys or something. But hey,
beer leaguers seems more like
the
an
beer
insult,
leaguers.
Though.
Based on how Michael Busch looked out there, maybe it's actually fitting. Unless that's too soon, Josh. Unless it's too soon for Mike.
Hey, he had that big extra innings hit, though. You can never take that away from him. And more importantly, away from me.
That's true. That's true. Josh is still trying to recover from screaming so much. But as always, thank you guys so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. Again, make sure to follow us on social media, listen to the show, do all that kind of fun stuff. For Josh Schaefer, this has been Blake Harris. Thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day wherever you may be.